Welcome to episode 22 of the Shinesparkers podcast. I'm Amanda Van Heil. I'm going to be your host, and I'm joined by Roy and our special guest, Kynan Pearson. Kynan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
I'm a creative director in the video games industry, and I'm here because I was a designer at Retro Studios for 7.5 years, and I worked on Metroid Prime 2, Prime 3, and Donkey Kong Country Returns.
That is all really, really cool. Like legit freaking cool.
Yeah, it was a dream come true to be able to work on Metroid as a huge fan of the franchise. So, yeah. And my time at Retro was some of my favorite in the industry. Great team.
What was it like just, when it's a game series that you're a fan of and then all of a sudden you actually get to become part of it? Like, what is that like?
I've actually had opportunities to work on quite a few games that I've been a fan of. Going to Retro was a dream come true because, like, when I was at Iguana prior to joining Retro, Jules Watcham, who runs Atui, and I had worked on basically a Metroidvania game called Forlorn for the Game Boy Color at the time. And so we had done this because Metroid had disappeared for a long time, and it was a small scale project, but something that we were super proud of. And so that was something that we had worked on, and it never ended up getting released. We were porting it to the Game Boy Advance, and then Acclaim kind of shut it down just because of the costs of basically. Well, I don't even know the reasons for shutting it down, but we were doing it kind of off the record, so to speak. So it was just a passion project. And then after that kind of never came out, I ended up joining Retro just around the time that Metroid Prime 1 was coming out. And so it was, I don't know, it was challenging in that when you're a fan of something, sometimes you have to put that aside to just make the proper progress and do things that are new and unique and not, try to clone the old and just produce something that you already enjoyed.
You have to be kind of objective with it.
Yeah, you do. But it's, it's always a thrill. And it was amazing to be able to contribute to a huge franchise and to also provide some of those new experiences within, the Metroid universe that eventually they came out and the fans have loved it. It's been nice to know that there's some portion of my fingerprints in the Metroid universe and that some of the things that I'd worked on have seemingly inspired some of the stuff that's continued forward, like the Mercury Steam. Metroid Dread has references to the Prime series, and so it feels like it's now all a big medley. So super cool. Hopefully that answers the question. Maybe too dry.
Yeah, absolutely. That was super cool just to hear just your background on that. And thank you so much again for being here. And we're going to be continuing talking with you, especially after the interview you gave with us last year. So we're happy to have you back with Shinesparkers.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So for today's group discussion, we're going to be talking about Metroid and other genres. We've had side-scrolling 2D games, first-person adventures, even pinball. What other genres do you want Metroid to experiment with? I mean, I personally would enjoy a third-person adventure, just because that's kind of the kind of games I've always grown up on, and I'd just like to see it from that perspective. I think that would be a lot of fun, just like a big open Metroid. I don't want to call it Breath of the Wild style because everything is being called Breath of the Wild style if it is open world or open air. But, something where you can see everything kind of just not the first person perspective, but the third person adventure. I think it'd be fun. But, not full on Star Fox Adventures, but something fun like that. As much as I love Star Fox Adventures.
Yeah, no, I think that's exciting. I think that would be a natural. It's almost what we got with Other M in terms of it being third person. That was Team Ninja, so you had a little bit of it wasn't restricted to the Z-axis, kind of like Metroid Dread became, which I think was the right move for that team to do. But I think that, doing something kind of Resident Evil 4 style with an over-the-shoulder aiming mechanism while you're running around, much more freedom of camera movement where you can see Samus at all times, where it bleeds into the third-person adventure kind of Uncharted, Demon Souls, Gears of War style. I think that would be actually really cool. So it'd be like a third pillar to the 2D side scrollers, and then the Metroid Prime first-person adventures. I think that would be killer to see.
As you said, Other M kind of tried to blend both types of Metroid. There were some rooms where it looked like it was 2D, and then you obviously had the first-person mechanics, but I think what you're talking about is fully open worlds, where it isn't like confined into one small corridor.
Yeah, I mean, in a certain regard, there's aspects of Metroid that's about isolation and about the corridor experience, like being able to, like the Prime games were rooms and halls, and the rooms got really big and felt like expanses, but they weren't necessarily, like a giant open world Breath of the Wild style. I think that, like we've seen tons of sandbox open world games, the Just Cause stuff, that embrace more mobility and interesting ways to move around the world, with like the squirrel suit and the parachute, and with Breath of the Wild we get the sailcloth and the ability to climb over surfaces. The Prime games always had like a super robust camera system for doing third-person elements, which was all based around the work that Mark H.H. had done for the Morph Ball. And I think that was already one of those areas where I feel like it proved out that it can work, even if you structured the game exactly like Metroid Prime, where you had rooms and halls and then Morph Ball tunnels, and you just stayed in third person the whole time, as some of the early videos of Metroid Prime had shown. I think it totally works. I think that going third person, you'd want to take advantage of, some potentially new mobility options, maybe give Samus some crazier abilities that, allow her to transform into things other than just the Morph Ball, which would give you new ways to move around the world. I know the screw attack being kind of unconstrained, freeform, like flying through the sky, might not necessarily work, but there's a ton of stuff that you could do to basically put limitations on it, or even just incorporate other abilities that take its place that don't give you, full command of the skies to just basically break the rules of the entire game. But yeah, no, I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you would have to put limits on it. Kind of like how Prime did with the spider ball and the screw attack. If you were able to just spider ball up any wall, that would break the game. Same thing if you were able to screw attack just everywhere.
Well, you can create that same isolation feeling in like an open world if it's like very desolate. Kind of like how it's common for scuba divers to experience claustrophobia, even though they're in like a big open ocean. It's still like that isolating feeling for some reason. So I feel like they could probably still capture that feeling if you were just like stranded on just some desolate planet and you're just like, I have nowhere to turn. I don't know what to do.
That makes sense, because if you're also in a hostile environment, like let's say a planet where humans can't breathe, you're in the suit, and the suit is all that's keeping you from instant death. So if you get a game over, Samus's suit explodes or dissipates or whatever, her goose is cooked.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way of thinking about it, but you can also go out of the box where, the blue suit Samus being more, I don't want to say vulnerable because she's not necessarily, but even without the protection of the suit, there are elements of that character that could be in other unusual settings. Like I even think something more like a Final Fantasy Tactics style strategy game where you could potentially even incorporate other hunters or other ally characters like the GF troopers and almost XCOM style plan out your attacks, and Samus ends up being a massive hero unit that if she gets taken out then the whole team loses. Or even something like a JRPG where we get the Paper Mario version of Metroid, but not stylized that way, just something more, turn-based combat, full exploration, NPCs running around towns potentially. Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's so many options.
Oh, how about like a Stardew Valley style game where you raise a farm of little baby Metroids? That would be so cute. And I would play that in a heartbeat. It'd be so much fun.
Yeah, basically Samus's homestead planet, and you've got Etecoons running around, and you can just basically make a giant facility, Satisfactory style, where it's all fully functional running. You can.
It'd be like Slime Rancher.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Just surround her with all kinds of cute animals.
And spoiler territory, but now that we've got the conclusion to Dread, maybe she could raise baby Metroids.
I like that idea.
She could clone some with her own DNA and just make a farm of them.
Yep. Bring the Metroids back. Actually, one thing that now I'm just running through the list of favorite games and figuring out where there are interesting fits, but I loved Returnal. Returnal being a roguelite format. And I think that Hades, like the idea of basically kind of a time loop sequence that Samus keeps restarting and then gets various power-ups that differ dramatically as she goes through, but something in the Link to the Past style camera or Diablo style camera where it's top-down kind of looking at the action. Maybe even twin stick shooter would be interesting and cool.
I know for Tomb Raider, they have the Lara Croft sub-series, which is like isometric arcade style gameplay, but the core gameplay of Tomb Raider kind of translates well to that. So, maybe they could do something like that with Metroid, like the way you're talking about Hades. The way the combat works there, you could probably have some spectacular boss fights if you apply that kind of formula to Metroid, with a bit of exploration added.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's funny, but like even with like Hades, you get a random assortment of abilities during each playthrough. I think that'd be a fun dynamic of, like you'd see things in your playthrough, but then it's kind of like, oh, I didn't get Morph Ball this time, or I didn't get, Shine Spark, or any, whichever ability. So your runs would differ dramatically, kind of playing through the same sequences over and over.
Kind of an RNG approach.
Yeah. That being said, I also think that it'd be super slick to do a boss rush style game where the game was more about just constantly being bombarded with interesting and unique boss battles, which, those are highlight moments from the games. But if you did a format where it was almost, I don't want to say Shadow of the Colossus style, but where bosses were the only significant engagement in the game, the rest of it was basically preparation for taking on the bosses, could be interesting and cool.
One genre that I would like Metroid to explore, and I am considering a feature where I go into this, is a graphic adventure game. If you think about the classic sort of games like Monkey Island or Siberia, or more recent titles like the Telltale games, I think that sort of format could work well for more of an atmospheric Metroid. So maybe not so focused on action, or going back to Telltale. Specifically, Season 4 of The Walking Dead, there were not necessarily quick time events, but it's an interactive movie with some exploration segments. So maybe Samus explores for larger periods of time, solves puzzles and the like, and then you have occasional combat sequences where you either fight enemies directly, or for major encounters it's all cinematic, in which case you press or hold a button to do a successful move or not. That sort of game could work if it's heavy on atmosphere and it has a robust score, good puzzles. If they have dialogue, it should be, if you're a stickler for Metroid tradition, it should be kept to a minimum, maybe the level of Dread, where it had, occasional cutscenes with characters and then just dialogue from Adam or whatever. No monologues, but conversations here and there. What I'm imagining is kind of a sweet spot between the classic style like the Siberia, the Monkey Island with puzzles, and the interactive movie segments like the Telltale sort of games.
Yeah, I could totally see that working. I don't know if you're familiar with Another World, but the idea of two characters that can't communicate verbally, you can get around the idea of basically having to have Samus with fully spoken dialogue and keep her more of the silent protagonist style, but it could be gestural, so it's kind of like Samus and another alien who can't communicate using language basically have to figure out a situation or get through a situation working together. You could lean into other analogies, kind of like King Kong, where, nobody's talking to King Kong, but there is some form of communication there. Or, in Eco, where Yorda, they speak different languages. So, there's not necessarily fully spoken dialogue.
Mm.
But then you've got puzzle solving and working together in an unusual way that would be interesting and memorable.
I'm not someone who hates Samus talking. I would like to see more of it.
Me too.
I do wish she would have talked a bit more in Dread, like maybe she responds to Adam a few times. But, people responded positively to her voice role in Dread, so maybe there's room for expansion on that in the future. Like maybe she talks at only certain points. Maybe she would mutter something to herself or something like that.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is in Dread, she's speaking a different language, which is a made-up language. So there could be the element of, doing the Panzer Dragoon type of thing, where she's speaking an alien language. So you can subtitle it in any language around the world, always getting the same delivery, and you're not judging the voice performance so much, but still hearing Samus talk as a possible idea.
I mean, I just always love having voice acting and performances in games. So that's something I just really enjoy, and as well as like performance capture. So I would love it to be like, in the different languages, but that is like an easy workaround. And then you don't have to deal as much with like the angry fans of it. Doesn't matter how good of a performance is. There's still going to be people who are like, the voice acting's terrible. It's like, no, it was a great performance. And you're just saying that because it's the cool thing to say. So they could avoid that by having Samus just speak in a different language and just subtitle it, and then that makes it more accessible to more languages, because it's a whole lot easier to subtitle something, I feel like, than to dub it in every language imaginable.
Yeah.
They did take that approach with Dread because aside from Adam, nobody in the game actually does speak English, and Adam's voice appears to be like they just ran it through Siri or something, which gets around having to cast 100 different voice actors for every region, and that's why he's able to talk in different languages.
Not to change the subject, but one thing that, just popped out as an obvious direction that, we saw a little bit in, I think it was Nintendo Land, but much more along the lines of like Star Fox or even X-Wing, TIE Fighter. Just having a ship-to-ship combat game, I think, would be awesome, where maybe, you've got space combat, you're flying around in Samus's ship, you're getting upgrades, you're basically doing that, and then maybe there's like boarding sequences where, you will land on another vessel or in a station and then be able to run around in third person through, the corridors and take out the core, take out the crew, potentially capture an alien bounty hunter style.
Oh, that sounds like fun. You could do like a lot of side quests with that too.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it opens up a bunch of ideas, because anyone that's coming to the table for that game, there's so many opportunities and so many options for what you could do that would be interesting and unique.
Federation Force, but fun. No, it had its moments.
I have to say this just because one of my favorite genres of all time is fighting games. I know Samus shows up in Smash Brothers, but there is an aspect where I would love to see, a dedicated Metroid fighting game, maybe developed by Arc System, who do Guilty Gear, and they did Dragon Ball Fighters. For them to basically take on all of the hunters, Samus, various characters throughout the history, create some new characters, bosses, and do maybe even a tag style assist based fighter, or just one-on-one with exaggerated combos and combat. More of a traditional fighting game sense.
That'd be cool. Would you get to play as like some of the bosses? Would you get to play as like Phantoon or Kraid or
yeah,
or one of the Chozos?
I've got a vision in my head of Mother Brain doing a roundhouse kick.
Well, no, I mean, it would be contextually appropriate. You could put Mother Brain into a different housing unit than the one that she was in Metroid and Super Metroid. Kind of like,
she's in her capsule and she just hops around.
Well, she could be in
around and crushes fighters.
An arachnid style body, or maybe it is that she's got her Super Metroid, full boss form, and she's just a large character.
That's what I was thinking with the roundhouse kick.
Yeah. But it'd be cool. Get Crocomire in there, get some of the maybe lesser known enemies, bring back Rundus and Gore and Gandreda.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, just give the cast a chance to shine in ways that they weren't necessarily able to do within their own respective games. And if you look at like how much dialogue and how much personality you get in like fighter intros and, the way that they do special moves, the custom animations, all of the unique, abilities that they have. Like if you look at NetherRealm's games, they have custom intros for every single combination of characters that goes against each other. So you'd get to hear, going back on, the silent protagonist thing, but having, intro dialogue where Samus is speaking, and you get the quips back and forth between Gandreda and Samus, or Dark Samus and Gandreda, and interactions that you've never experienced before.
And it would be a good way to introduce people to the games that like they haven't played yet. And that way they would be like, oh, I want to play this game because I remember playing as one of the bosses in the Samus fighting game. So that would be a good like intro, because seeing as Smash Brothers introduced a lot of people to like Metroid and the Earthbound series and like F-Zero and all that. I mean, it would be a way to introduce more people to Metroid. So that'd be really cool.
So now I'm getting ideas for like losing screens. Adam is saying something like, I did not authorize this victory. And then Samus loses and she has that scream of rage like at the end of Dread. And then she grabs the winner's head and slams them on the floor and drinks them through her hand.
There you go. Like you can see the genre expansion happening a lot. Like for instance, Riot, they've got Project L, which is their fighting game based on League of Legends characters, and they use skins from the series. So there's a lot of like crossover potential, and I think that anytime that you want to grow an audience, like having an open world third-person Breath of the Wild style Metroid game would introduce it to a whole new audience. Having a fighting game, introduce it to a whole new audience, like anything that you could do. And Nintendo has typically been really good about doing that with Mario, but Mario's had the sales potential to, for them to go, oh, this would sell a lot better if it was Mario Tennis, or oh, this would sell a lot better if it was Mario Kart. Metroid has never sold fantastic, but I see the potential to expand its audience, and with the momentum that they've got going on with, Dread having come out and gotten Game of the Year, and with Prime 4 coming out, there's all this momentum with the Metroid franchise to introduce it to new fan bases, and yeah, just pay off the potential because it's super cool.
So, Kynan, I would love to hear your thoughts and perspectives on Metroid Dread as a game designer, and what kind of ideas you would have for like a potential Metroid 6 if that were to happen.
Yeah, for sure. So I loved Dread. I absolutely loved it. It was one of those games that, I enjoyed for what it was, and I wasn't looking at it necessarily critically in the way that I do other games, just because it's very rare for me to be able to put aside my designer cap and just play something for the experience of it. All that being said, there are, like, if I had been a consultant on the project, I would have advised for, various things that they could take or leave. They made a fantastic game with or without it, but I think that for like the sequel, it would be addressing things from the original game, and then, expanding into cool new territory. But for the most part, one of the things that I think, I loved the exaggeration and the visceral quality of all of the abilities that they gave Samus in Dread. So I felt like everything was done effectively, with the exception of the crossbomb and the grapple. And I feel like the grapple just felt like you would get crab claw trying to press and hold too many buttons and a direction and use it, and it didn't naturally put you into a proper swing. It was cool for pulling towards surfaces, but I would have preferred to have more empowering kind of swinging potential and setups that utilize that a little better. And then crossbomb, I had wished that they had done something more like spider ball rather than the crossbomb, or even boost ball instead of crossbomb. Another thing is that the game was kind of a little linear in its format, in terms of forcing your path a little too well, and not giving you the breathing room to kind of explore and to open the game up. And I think part of that comes from, there was no like landing site that acts as basically a nexus for you to run back and forth like you get in Super Metroid. Because when you land your ship and then all of a sudden you're down an elevator and you don't even know where your ship is, it doesn't give you any grounding, like you understand the lay of the land, like where you entered the world, how the world is all connected. So in the sequel, I hope that they basically address that and give you a little bit of a greater sense of connection of the world and an understanding of the layout and how things fit together. Some of the elevators and trains, they feel like they just go to random locations, so you don't have a sense of orientation and positional awareness like you do in some of the other games, where it contextually makes sense how the connections work, and you have, it doesn't feel like just random areas that are slightly disconnected. I think one of the big things for me is that I feel like you got flash shift too early in Dread, and it was too fast and overpowered. So it becomes flash shift the game. Whenever you get flash shift, the character moves so fast that they had to actually start building in additional verticality just to prevent you from like flash shifting across huge swaths of the map. So I feel like I would like to see the movement speed actually slowed down a little bit, more like Super Metroid, just because it's such a, like, flash shift is so useful and so overpowered that it changes the dynamic of how the game plays forever after that. There's no limitations to it, so it really does feel like you're just seeing flash shift constantly, because it's so much faster and you avoid, it gets around enemies really easily. I know this is a giant, just like spew of a bunch of information, so I'm gonna pause, and if you want any clarification on that, or if you had any different ideas on some of those things, I'd love to hear from both of you.
I hear what you're saying about grounding yourself in the world. This time I think they went for a different approach. Because of the central theme of Dread, you're at the very bottom of the planet and you have to work your way up. But since there's no Ravenbeak wherever Samus is landing, she can probably have a bit more flexibility with her next mission to be able to return to her ship and save at it. It is kind of disappointing that you don't actually get to visit your ship in gameplay at all. Like, even at the end, you can't physically run into it and then enter it, because as soon as you enter the clearing, starts a cutscene.
Another thing is the Emmy areas all use the same theme, and they divide the other worlds. So it actually kind of dilutes the world theme Whereas, in Super Metroid, you had a very distinct and understood world theme per area. And because the Emmy areas divide the Dread locations, some of them start to bleed together, where you have a difficult time understanding where one begins and another ends, because the Emmy themes are the hard surface, cold metal, kind of desaturated look. And they changed the music. And while I do like the music in Dread, there's nothing that's like a hummable tune that you're just like, you remember the world because you remember the world music and the theme, and those things connect together. So I would love for them to like create much more distinct locations that don't necessarily get subdivided as much.
You mean you haven't gone flower picking humming the Gavaran theme?
No, I have not. Their world, like, I know that Mercury Steam has incredible artists, and some of the world themes are actually beautiful and are standout. But I do think that the repetition of the Emmy stuff kind of damages some of the imprinting that does for the player.
That is a really good point, because like the music is great, but yeah, it gets broken up so you don't like get it like in your head as well.
Yeah, it's not as infectious as like Super Metroid, or even when you're just cruising through worlds and you're hearing the theme recurring in the Metroid Prime games. All of the Metroids had more powerful musical themes that make you feel connected to the worlds.
You were saying about the Emmy theme kind of being the same throughout each zone. When you clear an Emmy from its zone, the theme changes, and it's a lot more distinctive. So I'm wondering, because AM2R did this, because they have a couple of Metroid Nest sub-areas, and the theme for that is always distinctive. Like, let's say for Ferenia's Emmy zone, could they have taken a sort of more somber, scarier version of the theme of Ferenia and maybe applied like Emmy effects to that? And the same for other areas to sort of make the music more distinctive. Maybe it starts out unsettling, and then gradually, like when you get to the final Emmy zone, it's you're about to die. That gives you that sort of feeling.
It's all possible. I'm not saying it's not possible, but almost if you look at even, movie themes, lullabies, commercial jingles, they're about creating this infectious repetition that becomes ingrained in your memory. And so, like, imagine, let's just do a stupid example. McDonald's, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Imagine that they had 15 jingles that they would play across all of their different commercials, and they wouldn't play the same jingle. So one would be ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba, I'm loving it. And then another one is ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, I ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, loving. It just doesn't, you wouldn't have the repetition just like branding that on your eardrums. So there is an aspect of anytime you break something up, like if you have too much, it's basically doesn't give any one thing the ability to latch on the same way. It's why a lot of the classic NES soundtracks, you'd play a level and you'd hear that one song looping over and over and over and over and over and over, and they're so memorable. But now, with productions being bigger, it's like they're putting in more effort. They're putting in way more music and way more variety. But there's nothing that's really like standing out and hooking into you because of, when you hear a bunch of different arrangements of the same song, it takes away from the impact of whichever the best one is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you need to hit kind of a sweet spot between recognizable and, play something else, I'm sick of this.
Yeah. And like, just think of what's happened with Star Wars throughout the years. Every time you hear Vader's theme or Luke's theme, it is so memorable that it like evokes this emotional response in you. And if they had they gave Luke 15 themes that all differed dramatically from that, and there are various arrangements that make their way into some of the films, but for the most part they stick to the major melodic beat that everyone recognizes.
Well, let's move on to the mailbag. So we asked, if Metroid Prime was released in 2022, what quality of life improvements would you like to see made to it? And so here is what you guys had to say. Carlisle on Twitter says, what comes to mind might be making the transports for each area work like fast travel and improving the final backtracking caused by the 12 artifacts. I like that because I love fast travel. Like, I don't know, to me, if there's no point to going back and forth, then it just seems like busy work and you've already traveled it already. So I'm all for fast travel. So I love that idea. Yeah, several people are saying fast travel. It's just a convenience thing. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's another fast travel one. Definitely a form of fast travel since there's no direct from Phendrana to Talon or Phendrana to Phazon Mines, etc., etc. Keep the physical safe, so. And that is from Lexicon by Metroid Dread. Good Twitter name. Several people had mentioned like the accessibility with like a colorblind friendly mode. Here we go. This is the one I was looking for from Sable Gear. Came up today in chat. Colorblind friendly mode. Some enemies can be scanned for clues to their beam weakness, like troopers, but some can't. Fission Metroids and P itself, which makes the end game tricky. And some kind of like icon tag on the HUD to indicate a corresponding beam would be great.
That's a good point, because I was thinking about this recently with scan targets in Prime 2 and 3. Not really a problem for the first Prime, but for the sequels. When you're using the scan visor, stuff is color-coded. So like green if you've already scanned it, red if it's an important object, and blue if you haven't scanned it. So if they were to re-release those games, they should come up with an alternative for colorblind people.
Here's one that somebody had mentioned about that. This is, I don't know how to say this, Omega something Alpha. Okay, Kono Omega Da is what it says. This person says, when I think of changes to Prime, the one leaf that gets a close-up during the landing sequence comes up. A petty thing to be stuck on, but realistically, though, I suggest better colorblind support. All players could benefit during thermal X-ray visor use, too. And then there was a reply to this. I'm sorry, Guy Mendez says, Ridley's shadow as he flies through Phendrana drifts is also very low quality. Actually, all shadows are very poor, but that definitely would be addressed. I mean, I'm not even colorblind, and I had plenty of times where I was like, I can't see this, and I just have to like turn the brightness just way, way up. So that I definitely think would be a great improvement.
Yeah, if it's a full-on remaster, they'll probably address a lot of that, improving texture quality, models, etc.
And then we're going to do one more. This is from the Instagram. This is from Powers of Dylan. Comes up with two things. The hope is dual analog stick control scheme that works and feels great. I would personally rather have this than the Switch's gyro controls where you have to recenter every 8 seconds. And then a thought is perhaps they will add additional lore or environmental storytelling somewhere that in time will be revealed to have been a setup or tease for the events of Prime 4. More ways to neatly tie everything together without taking away from the organic, classic flow we're used to with the game. I think I'd like to see that, honestly, but keep it subtle. That would be pretty cool.
What if there's a new terminal in one of the rooms of the Phazon Mines? Experiment status update. Metroid Project Dread is complete.
Oh my gosh, that would be so awesome.
If I find that, I'm going to just die laughing because how meta.
I do love some good meta. That's awesome. That is so perfect. So for our next mailbag question, what video game genre do you think Metroid could explore in the future? Let us know on Twitter or Instagram. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening. Roy, of course, thanks for being here. And Kynan, thank you for being a wonderful guest. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Any messages to the community? Or
Yeah, ultimately, I just want to say thank you to the community. Thank you to the fans. I love seeing all the fan art, fan orchestration, remixes, what the Shinesparkers bring to the table. Without the support of basically all of the players that love this franchise and people actually going out of their way to buy the new games and basically beg for sequels and updates and pester Nintendo constantly about just giving us more Metroid. Without that, Metroid wouldn't be thriving right now. And so I'm grateful because as a fan of Metroid, I just want more. And keep it up. And I can't wait to see all of the new creations from the fan community from here on out.
Well, everybody, once again, thanks for listening. You can find us online at shinesparkers.net, and you can follow us on social media, on Twitter at Shinesparkers, as well as on Instagram at Shinesparkers. We'll see you next mission.
See you next mission.
See you next mission.
So what are some genres we think may work well for Retroid? Let me try that again. I was thinking Retro Studios and mixed it with Metroid.
We're recording this on the 8th of February, so the Nintendo Direct is tomorrow. So in before Retroid gets announced, an 8-bit demake of Metroid Other M.
I love it. Be even funnier if that actually happened. Let's see.
Yep.
And what other genres do we think Metroid would be? And what other genres would be cool for Metroid to experience? Oh, what is wrong with me today?
So Other M kind of tried to do both by having So Other M kind of tried to do both second and break the game. Same thing if you were able to screw attack just everywhere.
Yep. For sure.
I will be right back. I'm so sorry. My cat is crying and I'm trying to figure out what is happening. I'm guessing she just has a toy in her mouth and wants me to come get her, but I'm just, if something's wrong, I gotta go check.
Yep.
Of course.
Tasha, what is it, baby girl? What? You seriously just wanted me to come play with you? All right. Sorry about that. I was right. She was wanting to play.
That's okay.
Of course she was. So I just threw some toys around and gave her some choices to play with. So I'm so sorry for that.
It's all good.
Yep.
Because it was about to get like where you could hear it on the mic. She was getting so loud.
Yeah. I've got a little mini labradoodle who's sitting, or basically he's zonked out sleeping next to me while I'm recording this, so I understand.
She's back at it. She can just get over it right now. She wants me to go in there and like just start rubbing her belly, and she wants me to wrestle with her because even though she's a cat, she acts like a puppy.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
All right, so where were we? We were talking about... Well, I feel like we could talk about this all day. So let's go ahead and move on so we don't have to give Darren a heart attack when he sees all the footage for this. Or not footage, whatever the word is, recording.
This podcast was edited by Darren Kerwin and Giulio Bruschini, with music from Maserati. If you enjoyed the podcast, you could check out more episodes at shinesparkers.net/podcast. We can also be found on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. See you next mission.